One of the most frequent questions we get as a Witness US program is about what you should do after you film a video of police violence. One strategy that we've seen to be effective is sharing your video with a journalist, but it's not always clear how to do that in a way that's safe or effective. So in order to address some of those concerns, I'm here today with a journalist who covers police violence and works with video often for his reporting. Hi, thank you so much for speaking with me today and sharing your experience as a journalist working with eyewitness footage. So I have a series of questions to ask in order to learn more about how community filmers, protesters who are documenting, etc., can work with journalists like you to expose the truth. So first things first, tell us who you are and what do you do for work?
My name is Nick Pinto, and I'm a written word journalist who reports mostly in New York City. I cover a lot of stories about the New York Police Department and about protest movements inside the city and police accountability.
Great, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to learning from your experience today. So can you share a little bit about how you have used eyewitness footage in your reporting in the past, and how do you actually find the footage that you use?
I've used video in pretty much every possible way that it could come to me. I often find it online. Most of the sorts of videos that I'm making use of involve interactions between police and protesters or police and civilians. Sometimes I find those online. Sometimes they're submitted to me. I often encounter them in lawsuits as pieces of evidence, or they're given to me by lawyers representing people who have had encounters with the police.
So when you do come across eyewitness footage that you think can play a role in your reporting, how do you decide whether it's substantial or verifiable enough to be used in your work? What are you looking for with cell phone footage?
I think there are a number of things that I'm looking for. If I'm going to be making use of any kind of video footage, I need to be confident that it represents with some accuracy what happened. And so, if it's supposed to have taken place at a time and place, I'm looking for elements that confirm that. Can I tell where this happened? Can I tell, when this happened, what time of day? The problem that I run into most often is the video properly contextualized? Does it show with any depth what happened immediately before the incident in question, what happened immediately afterwards? Because oftentimes, especially in incidents that involve police use of violence, at a certain point in the story, I'm going to call the police department and say, I'm looking at a video that shows your guys hitting someone or something like this. And the response will come back, well, you have to understand, before that, what happened before the video took place. And so being able to have a good sense of sort of what leads up to an incident or what happens afterwards, I think longer videos are better for my purposes in terms of understanding what's going on. Even if the critical part of the video or the sexy part of the video or the incendiary part of the video is very short, as a journalist, I want to see the boring, super long version just so that I have an understanding of what's going on. I'm always happiest when I get a super long video that has too much information than one that's been edited down to something so short that it's hard to know how it fits into anything else.
So what you just shared is consistent with the guidance that we at Witness train activists with. We really stress the importance of making sure your footage is verifiable and relevant, that you film details or add information that helps establish when and where the incident takes place, like, filming landmarks or turning your GPS coordinates on, or even just saying the time and date out loud on your recording. But to your point about the importance of being able to see what happened before the incident happened in order to make sense of, who or what escalated the violence. As I'm sure unfortunately, our instincts are usually to grab our phones and start filming after something egregious or violent has already been set into motion. But I think it's important for people to know that just because you weren't able to capture everything, your footage can still be useful. So can you share how you've been able to use even just bits and pieces of footage to tell a larger story of police violence with your work?
Yeah, even if the video doesn't show as much as I might want it to, there's still ways that it can be useful to me. For one thing, it's a starting place for figuring out who I can talk to as a journalist to who may have seen what happened and can tell me about that.
So we already talked about the importance of establishing time, date, location, trying to film what happened leading up to the violence. Is there anything else you can share about what is most valuable for your reporting when it comes to cell phone footage?
Yeah. So as a journalist, I'm trying to get to the truth, the complete truth. And so the kinds of video evidence that I find most useful in that are as complete as possible. I want sort of the long, boring version, though I understand sometimes, the necessity of protecting people's identities. From my perspective, as someone who's trying to figure out what happened, the more layers of sort of obfuscation or information erasure, the more nervous I get, because it means that I don't know everything that's going on. From my perspective as a journalist, I'd much rather see the complete raw material, having reached some sort of understanding with the person who's giving it to me about how I'm going to use it and not use it, than have a highly edited, highly anonymized video document that's difficult for me to sort of evaluate.
Yes, and that really speaks to our guidance for folks to film continuously instead of starting and stopping, because not only does it give journalists like you a better idea of what happened, it can also help fight against claims that footage has been edited or manipulated. Another thing that we really focus on with our work and our trainings is how to document actions and protests while still practicing consent, concealing identities when necessary, and being really thoughtful of the surveillance state in general. So a question I want to ask you is, if you found or received protest footage where someone's face or people's faces are blurred, would that hinder your ability to use that footage in your investigation? Would you need to see the original footage in order to be able to actually use it?
That depends a lot on the circumstance. I think that can vary. Certainly, if part of what I'm trying to do to report out this incident is to talk to as many people who were there as I can, being able to identify people who were there would be valuable to me, and yeah, being able to see the unblurred footage would be important. And that's something that I'm certainly prepared to talk again, depending on the situation. But I'm prepared to talk to people who might be bringing me video about, reaching some sort of understanding that my job as a journalist is not to get people in trouble or anything like that. It's to tell the story accurately. And so, if we can reach some sort of understanding where I'm going to look at the raw video, but I'm not going to post it in a way that needlessly puts people in danger, that I'm just going to use it for my own reporting process. That's the kind of thing that someone who has a video to share can ask for. I should add, different journalists are going to have different approaches to that question, and I think as you're thinking about who you want to be working with, it's worth sort of researching journalists' track records. How have they used video in the past? How have they sort of covered these kinds of things?
That's super helpful. Thank you. So in addition to protecting the identities of people featured in the footage, there have also been many situations where the person filming became the target of police harassment, retaliation, or even unwanted media attention, which is why I like to remind folks that they have the option to share footage anonymously. They don't need their names publicly attached to the footage. From a journalist perspective, if you were working with a filmer who was worried about their safety, or their security, how could they share a video with you and ensure their anonymity? What would happen if you were subpoenaed for your sources, for example?
Sure. So there are several answers to the question of how someone with a video to share can do so while preserving their anonymity. One way is to ensure that even the journalist receiving the video doesn't know who shot it. As a journalist, I want as much information as I can get so that I can satisfy myself about the veracity and accuracy of a video. So I'm reluctant to take anonymously shot videos, but sometimes a video is so compelling and shows something important enough that that even if it comes to me through maybe it comes to me through a lawyer who doesn't want to tell me who their client is, maybe it comes to me through an organization that's involved in monitoring things like this. granting anonymity to sources is something that sometimes I'm prepared to do, and sources can always talk to me off the record, which means that nothing we discuss is ever going to find its way into print. And so if someone, we can have an off the record conversation in which someone says, I have this video I'd like to share, but I'm nervous about how it could come back on me. If my name is attached to it, I'll agree to show it to you if if you agree not to put me in danger in this way, because and here are the reasons why my identity actually isn't important to the story. That's a conversation that I can have. And as a journalist, we may or may not be able to reach that agreement. But if we do reach that agreement, my word is my bond on that. And that's that's not just because I'm an honorable person. That's because my career, my credibility, my ability to work is premised on that being an inviolable trust. If one time I get a reputation for burning a source in that way and putting them in danger, no one's going to talk to me. If you're talking to a credible journalist, that's something that you can take to the bank. Journalists protecting their sources extends to facing civil penalties. If the government says we want to know who you're talking to, first of all, there are legal protections that sometimes protect journalists from the consequences of refusing to do that. And there are plenty of journalists who've gone to jail rather than reveal their sources. And so, that's something that people should feel confident in talking to the press about.
That's really reassuring to know that there are so many good journalists out there committed to protecting their sources, and a helpful reminder to research a journalist and their work before actually sharing footage with them. So we established that anonymity is possible for a filmer, but how much does who filmed a video play a role in your decision about whether or not the footage is trustworthy? Does it matter if the person is an activist or a right-wing militia member? Does this play a role at all in your research?
Yeah, to the extent that the video is documenting something that I didn't personally witness, I am interested in the credibility of the person who's giving it to me. If the video is coming from someone who has a long track record of producing deceptively edited, sort of selectively framed, misleading political hit jobs, that's something that I'm going to bear in mind when I'm evaluating the video. On the other hand, just because somebody is coming from a particular political position, or even if someone is sort of presenting themselves antagonistically to the police or something like that, that doesn't excuse police misbehavior if that's what I'm writing a story about. And so I am interested in who shot the video, just because it is part of the context of it, and it helps me evaluate what's going on. But again, I'm also interested in what happened on the video, and who shot it may or may not, be critical to that.
Do you have any advice for how someone can go about finding the right journalist or media organization to share footage with?
If you have a video that you're trying to get into the hands of the press, I think it makes sense to really think about, who you might give it to, who has familiarity and expertise with the situation that your video concerns. So from that perspective, I think there are good reasons to be looking for local journalists who maybe were covering the event in question themselves, and have their own familiarity for that reason, or who are familiar with the players involved. There's a trade-off there. I think there's an impulse to sort of find the highest profile journalist you can to get this to the biggest audience, and that there's something to be said for that. But also, the highest profile journalist, first of all, may not have the bandwidth to even concern themselves with what you're sending them, and they also may not have the kind of depth of familiarity with the situation. So finding someone who is familiar with that, I think is generally worthwhile and a good idea. When you've got a video to shop around, I think you ask people who are, and I think organizations that are familiar with that kind of stuff, or lawyers who do that kind of work, are often people who sort of serve as guides.
Great, thank you. Do you additionally have any advice on the best way to contact a journalist once they've secured or found a person they'd like to reach out to?
Journalists like to be found, so they tend to make it pretty easy. If you're on social media, a lot of journalists are on Twitter. Their DMs are open, and so you can DM them, or their email or their phone number is often available in their profile. Or if you Google them, a lot of journalists have websites with their contact information. A lot of journalists use Signal or other encrypted messaging apps. So if you're nervous again about reaching out to them, that can be a good way to do it.
So what is the safest way someone can share footage with a journalist?
There are a lot of there are a lot of different ways to do it with varying degrees of safety, and you sort of have to figure out what your risk model is, and inevitably the safest things are often sort of the least convenient. The safest thing probably would be for me to watch the video on their computer and never to sort of have any exchange, practically, just because I want to be able to review this video to my satisfaction. I want a copy of the video when we're talking about something like this. And so how do I get a copy of the video? Probably the safest thing would be a physical handoff, right, where it's not going over the internet. I'm getting a thumb drive or something like that. If people are really nervous about being identified, by third-party watchers, they probably don't want to be using their personal email account or their professional email account. They might want to set up an email account that can't be tracked back to them. They probably want to encrypt that email. Journalists are used to getting encrypted emails, and most of them have their public key available either in their Twitter bio or on their website or somewhere. A lot of publications have what's called secure drop facilities set up so that there are ways to anonymously deliver either emails or attachments to the publication, and so that's another option.
Thank you so much, Nick, for your insights, your willingness to share, and your keen reporting. This has been so incredibly informative, and I know this will be a valuable resource for anyone hoping to use video to hold authorities accountable. Thank you so much, and take care.